Okay, so apparently we're at the pivot point. There's enough data to indicate that that is the case. We've had a number of temporal markers. I was waiting to see if we would cross basically a 50% threshold of this particular group of temporal markers in a set. And we've got temporal markers showing up all over globally, especially around the vax and the problems. Now that we've had attacks in India on vaccination stations and vaccination personnel, as well as others in this, that's one of the major temporal markers that's showing up. Even spun badly or spun 180 degrees by the mainstream media, the deaths in India are still starting to alarm people. Now, as soon as it comes out that they're dying not due to the COVID, but due to the COVID plus the vaccine, lots of people are going to start freaking out. And so I think, in my estimation, this was one of the major little bumps we had pending on our building emotional tension. I don't think all the riots and that kind of stuff happening on May Day are a big deal. It's kind of like, the rioting in Paris. Well, okay, that's, it's May Day. What do you do, right? If it's Tuesday, it must be Belgium. If it's May Day, there must be riots in Paris. It's just the way the world operates. So it's not a really big deal. However, the situation in India is a big deal, okay? And it's going to get worse as the time goes by. And it will be surprising if we don't actually have many governments around the world collapse as a result of what's been done with the vax and the problems coming out. Statistically, we just have to acknowledge that they've vaccinated, they claim, 1.25 billion people. And so that's basically 1/7 of the planet. So just think of that many, 1/7 of the planet. If we were all in one country, it would be only one country that would fall. But 1/7 of the planet spread around the planet is still a huge proportion of people that will, relative to population of any individual country, that will be aggressive and angry about what's been done to them, those that survive, okay, because it's coming down to that right now. And we're starting to see we're starting to see the righteous indignation of the victims starting to show up in videos and in articles and images out and about, mostly in videos, almost all of them off of YouTube. And that, I think, is a major change, right? You have to understand that it takes a lot for someone who's ill and ailing to put themselves out there in that condition as a face for anything. You just don't feel good. You're just don't have the energy to project. And here all these people, are mainly women, are showing up and saying, here's my story and here's how I've been damaged by this, and that we must stop this. The vaccinations, we must stop. And it's starting to get some traction, getting a lot of views and a lot of people talking about it. Now, so far, mainstream media, MSM, globally, is not in any way echoing, all right? They're having a little bit of gentle pushback on it, but they're not really echoing any of it at all. And that will change here soon. I think it'll change in May. And I think what will happen is that there will be a personality from within the mainstream media who will have been directly damaged by the vax, either themselves or a relative of theirs dying or something, but directly emotionally damaged, and that individual will start speaking, and that's going to cause this this crack in the infrastructure for the mainstream media. Then it just really all starts pouring out as per the overwoo, and each and every story piles on, and we get to a point where even those individuals who are totally captured by the globalists, the cabal, whatever you want to call them, right? Even those individuals in our society who are whose minds have been totally captured by these nefarious groups, will start to see things that will shatter their own internal sense of surety of their position. And as the mainstream media starts crumbling, it won't be there to reinforce that old idea. And you will find that the crumble will happen very rapidly, so that they'll go through hell because their minds are going to be all torn up about all of this. They've been basically a prisoner of war for a while, and we have to think of them that way, right? So in my opinion, your former friends who used to be friends before they became progressives, and who the capturing of took them away from you, are every bit as much prisoners of war as if they'd actually gone off somewhere and were stuck in a gulag, right? Because their minds have been captured. And that mind capture, that mind gulag, will fade fairly rapidly once they enter this point of the pivot, okay? And the pivot it's like in any martial art, you move in such a way that your opponent is moving faster than you, and you choose your point of leverage, and then you attempt to, in a grappling art, and like judo or aikido or something, you attempt to pivot them in space. And so you want to seize control of their balance. And the smart people do it when their opponent is in the midst of a step or off balance already. And then you just simply harmonize with what your opponent gives you, which is their unbalanced state, and the pivot becomes that much easier. So basically, it's a long roundabout way of saying that it's easier to shift weight and mass in universe when it is already in motion. So if something's zooming along, it's easier to make it turn than if you've got to pick it up and get it zooming along before you can turn it, right? And so we find ourselves where the entire global social order is in movement. The strange energies from space have been here for probably 22 years in a palpable level, because they started bleeding through in the data sets in the very first part of the runs in 1997 and 98. So that was the first encounter that I'd gone into the strange energies, and I think they've really ramped up. We're seeing it in the weather, and we're seeing it in the climate change, and so on, which is to an ice age, by the way. It's not global warming, and we should all run our SUVs all day long to try and warm this place up. Anyway, though, so the pivot is happening. Our social orders are all in chaos after having been compressed by the lockdown. Mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, spiritually, etc. Right? Everything had been compressed. That can't last. So we're in the natural response. We're in that natural point of human response. And maybe the spark has been India. All right, so there's riots in India, and they're beating the shit out of all of the vax guys. And so the vax narrative is already dying there. And we see it dying all over. And we see this idea of the solidity that the MSM can paint a picture is already vague. It's already faint. Okay, it's already very faint. So it's fading fast. And it's going to get to a point where, and I think probably, let's choose a day, probably May 19th, based on this last time I was looking at things here. Yeah, I would say May 19th is a good one. Because we've got temporal markers that I can lay out here. I think around May 19th we'll start seeing USA and maybe Canada cracking MSM, leading to an India kind of response. Somebody going to get beat down, okay? I don't know who or the how or the details of it, but that's the kind of emotional building tension that we have here. And okay, so we need to understand some things here, okay? Just as a preface to going forward, because we're in a very complex situation, and so thinking is not the accumulation of facts. So basically, schooling is the dumping of facts, they're attempting to anyway, it used to be that way, into people. And but that's not thinking. Prior to our modern school system, our modern, what they call education, but it's not really. In the olden days, you used to go to school in order to learn to think, in order to learn to reason and be rational. And that was the goal of the school, was to produce a thinking individual, not someone who necessarily knew, you know, which general killed what other general in what war in what year. The accumulation of facts was considered supportive. You needed to be able to ascertain, and so you needed to be able to think critically in order to use facts, okay? So there's no point in giving people facts unless they can think critically. If you give people facts who don't know how to think, you end up with Antifa and BLM. These people do not know how to analyze, they don't know how to think critically at all. And so they are given facts and think they have knowledge. And the two are widely separate, because knowledge is the ability to derive meaningful intelligence from those facts. Okay, so I have knowledge if I have the ability to survey a landscape and use my eyes and my skills and determine where prey might lay, like I see the rabbit over, you know, on the hillside, that kind of thing, right? I have knowledge in that situation. But if I don't have the reasoning to be able to understand that that rabbit is my prey, seeing the rabbit doesn't do me any good in filling my belly. So there's no knowledge about a process there. There's merely a fact. Furry creature on the ridge that you could hit with a rock if you wanted, but, you know, so anyway. So my point being that the accumulation of knowledge, of facts, is not knowledge. And we have to start separating that. People have to learn how to think critically. And thinking critically has a specific set of goals. Thinking critically is the ability to reason about facts and derive a meaningful conclusion. And this, now, that's the goal of critical thinking, okay? Or should be the goal of all thinking. But, so you want to be able to reason about the facts and to derive, that is an active process, to derive, that's the verb in this, a conclusion, that's the object that we're after, okay, that is meaningful. That's a modifier to that object. It has to be a meaningful conclusion to you. You know, so a hungry person seeing a rock and knowing that that's a rock and that's a conclusion doesn't do him any good. It's not really meaningful. It's not going to do anything for that hunger. So in a practical way, knowledge is what we use to survive, and it's a survival skill, right? Knowledge is reasoning. Facts are not. Now, critical thinking is slightly different than regular thinking, which is that ability to derive a successful, meaningful conclusion from facts. In critical thinking, you go into it with exactly that same goal, but you know ahead of time that there's a preposition on that, right? And the preposition is that you have to do this reasoning about those facts to derive that conclusion when the facts are within a field that may possibly contain deception and or bad data. So you're in a situation where critical thinking means that you can't assume that your facts are factual. And thus you have to reason about each and every one of the facts individually to ascertain that before you get into the larger reasoning. So it's a bit more thinking that is involved. Now you get good at it, and it's not as tedious and pedantic. It's not as tedious as the pedantic would make it seem. However, you can use the very pedantic nature of it. You could do a list, on every single one of the facts pros and cons about it, what makes you think it's true, what makes you think that it might not be true, and go through this whole route. And then, at the end of all that, you could reason about the total overall presentation that you thought those facts were presenting, and you'd actually have a better understanding of what you were thinking about and a better framework for that reasoning. Now, much of military training, especially under chaotic conditions, is designed to teach critical thinking. And this is why we have the idea of the fog of war, because even critical thinking can fail when you're in the fog of war and the thinking machine itself is being affected by the circumstances it's supposed to reason around, right? So we have this fog of war thing. And this is the juncture that we're at right now. So we are in a war. We could look at it as a war of good and evil. We could look at it as a war of enlightened thinking versus, medical authoritarianism and communism. We could look at it as a war between the CCP and the rest of the planet because the CCP released the virus on us, which caused all this stuff. We could look at it at many different levels, but each and every one of those levels must acknowledge that we are in a war, and we have been. Now, take this to heart. Inculcate this idea that right at this moment you are in World War III. And so far, it's a soft war. And hopefully, find all the wood we can and knock on it, we can keep it that way, right? Now, World War III is a war in spite of the fact that we do not have the optics, the perceived optics that should indicate we should all be suffering from stresses that are, post-traumatic stress syndrome. But we all are suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome, even though there's been no optics to support that. There's no bombs falling or this kind of thing, right? But there's bodies and all of the other stressors that you would see in a war, because we are in a war. And there's casualties, and the society's being turned over. All of these kind of things always happen in wars. So I think, personally, we are in a very interesting position because of the war that the CCP launched against everybody else, and it's probably the globalists on the other side of the CCP trying to reduce the population by 1/7. I think we're in that position where the planetary social order is going to change. I do not believe in, it is my conclusion, no belief system involved, it is my conclusion that the globalists, the power elite, are too stupid to manage the dynamism of the global social order in change. They may have their goals, they may intend to do so, they may intend to manage it, but I think they're too stupid to be able to do it. If you've ever been in a riot or a mob situation, you will understand what I am saying. If you've ever been in a war situation, especially when you're the grunt, right, you'll understand what I'm saying. It's too chaotic for them for the powers that be to grasp this. And this, by the way, is why all of the quantum financial system stuff is bogus. You cannot control every single asset on the planet at that level and manage anything. That's all these accumulation of facts and no knowledge, no intelligence, no meaningful conclusions to be derived from them. And that always fails, and that's always bogus if anybody suggests that such a thing will occur. So, so people talking quantum financial system are full of shit, at least on that subject. Sorry about that. I was into Olympia yesterday. Well, hey, I probably have a case of contagious vaccinosis. So I'm coughing, I'm hacking. It's been this way since I was in Olympia. I had to do the masks crud. Now that contributes to it. But also, there's a very slight irritation because I've been around people that have been vaccinated. Otherwise, I'm out here on the coast. The winds are blowing inland, so I don't get anything anyway. And thus, I'm assuming that I have a small case of contagious vaccinosis, which is the shedding of the spike protein. Okay, so we're going to go into critical thinking right now. We're going to do some of it, right? And because we're going to examine some of the things that we know. And we're going to talk about how this is leading into the pivot, because we have to examine things in the minutia, all the way up to our level, all the way up to the cosmos. So let's look at the spike protein. The spike protein, it looks sort of like that in 1/3 aspect of it, okay? And so this is sort of the petal on the top of it. And when you see it, it's kind of bulbous shaped. Now I'm going to draw the next one. And I'll draw them in different colors just so that you can see the effect that is created here. And what we have is we have folded proteins. Now, and then this is the top of this thing, and then right in the middle of that, heading down, so this is the top, and it would be represented by this, and right in the middle of it is this long thing they call the spike. Okay, to me, the spike is neither here nor there. It's a small, straight, extruded, polycharged. It has multiple charges along its length, so multiple electrical charges. It's the way it adheres to your vitamin D system. It's all charge. Anyway, but the interesting part to me is the top. And we're looking straight down on the top in this view right here. And so seen from a side view, it would look at it sort of like that if we were looking from the side that is green. All right. Now the spike comes on down and it comes in and it affects and it tries to attach to any cell and that is vitamin D deficient and penetrate through the cell wall with the spike in order to provide instructions. Now, when it's attached to a virus, it penetrates through the cell wall and tells the cell to replicate the virus. This thing may not be able to penetrate the cell wall, but we have in the mRNA told the mRNA how to make this, and how so that our mRNA has the spike preloaded into it if you get the shot. And this is not good in my opinion. The reason it's not good is because that this spike protein is the artificial part, it's the bioweapon part of the coronavirus. So they just took a regular old bat coronavirus that was a little bit infective, but not very much, over the common cold. And what they did was they put this spike on it, and that's what made it into the terrible thing that it is. The reason that it's terrible is that this spike is three interconnected and cross-linked folded proteins, okay? This is the important part. These three folded proteins are prions. If they were individual, you'd have three individual prions. A prion is a self-replicating folded protein of persistence. The prions cause mad cow disease. They cause spongiform encephalopathy and sponge brain, right? And the prions act in the brain because they can cross the blood-brain barrier. This is three of them together. I don't know how the body's going to react to being turned into a factory for those guys, but I can tell you that the presumption by anybody who thinks about it this way is that it will not react well. And we've seen too many people with too many mental kind of problems resulting from this to not pay attention. If you will go and look at some of the videos on BitChute about this, you will see many people, mostly women, coming forward saying they're having huge neurological reactions to getting even the first shot of either the Pfizer or the Moderna mRNA product. And what's going on is that these folded proteins, the prions, they're not prions, they're part of the spike, but it's the top of the spike, the petal, if you will, is actually causing brain problems because it is a massively huge prion, and it may break down and affect the brain by splitting up into many little prions, which basically you may give yourself mad cow disease by turning yourself into a factory for these things. That's what I'm saying is the sponge brain. We're already seeing the accidents. We're already seeing people have strokes. People have dazed episodes while they're driving, a crash. There are reports all over. Just look for the sudden uptick in news articles about basically casual accidents, right? Otherwise, and some of them are actually connected to the vaccine. Like, a guy has a stroke and his wife's in the car and he's only 2 hours away from having had his second shot. And these kind of things. So some of them we can clearly put down to that. Now, another thing about this is that in the critical thinking about all of this, we know that these things are likely prions in terms of how the spike itself is going to affect our body, so it cannot be good to put these in, and prions are associated with all of the blood problems that people have. Part of mad cow disease is a bunch of weird blood problems. So anyway, in terms of the critical thinking, reasoning about this stuff, we've got the spike protein going through the social order, and now we're seeing the problems in being reported in India, not only with, so in India they've got two major issues. The issues are fertility. They take that very seriously. And the women's fertility being messed up by the spike protein shed from vaccinated people is coming out in the Hindu social order. And then they've also got let's just call it the bad reactions, okay? Not to the free vaccines, but the bad reactions to the vaccine plus COVID encounters, as was suggested. Now, this has also been magnified. It's been magnified by the monsoons. But it turns out to be less of an issue than is usual. The reason that is a problem normally is because India is a subcontinent bounded by India's like a big subcontinent, goes off like that, but it's got the Himalayan mountain range that comes on over and encapsulate it. So all of the weather patterns get locked in there. And so the Hindu population, being poor, does not supplement. The Hindu population relies on the sunlight. They're dark-skinned. And so within 4 days of no real daily sunlight to speak of, any intensity, their vitamin D levels drop. And so it's expected that within 4 days of any kind of significant cloud cover, we're going to start seeing a spike in the COVID response of the population under these conditions, because their vitamin D levels will drop and they won't have any oral supplementation for it. And sure enough, we do see that. The spread in the virus has now triggered off a reaction in those that have been vaccinated, as had been forecast. So, not a good situation at all. And let's see. Now we got a reason about a lot of this stuff at a serious level. I'm not worried about myself for the cough. It'll pass. This is just from the intensity of going through all of that stuff yesterday and all of the things I did. I'm curious about what's going to be happening as a result of this pivot in India. Will it spread globally? Is it a temporal marker that I think it is for such a response globally as people push back against the vaccine Nazis, right? Against the fascists that want to kill us all with that shit. Some of these indicators that I use a lot of different indicators now to tell me where we're at relative to progress of things through the social order. And so I will monitor podcasts of specific individuals because I know that these individuals are representative of a wider class of people, right? And I know their position within that class, so I can tell if they're an early adopter or, you know, more mainstream or a final adopter kind of a thing. So I follow some of the podcasts, and I'm watching on some of those podcasts today and tomorrow, which are routine weekly things, to see how far some of these memes have percolated into our social order. But we may be very close to the same kind of pivot occurring in the U.S. Over the women's fertility issues that has had in India. I don't know that it'll be the same reaction of mobs storming through the streets with giant sticks to beat the crap out of people in cars, but it may well get that way. And then a couple of other things here real quick. We're going to hit the period here in the overwooing where we're going to come into the UFO issues. When the UFOs are brought up, I want you to understand, do not believe the aliens. Okay? Okay, so it sounds stupid, but don't believe them. And here's why. Here's the issue. You're going to see a bunch of humans that will start spouting off nonsense that they believe that they may have been told by aliens, all right? Whether this is contactees or whether this is officialdom sources, it doesn't matter. Presume this assumption here. Someone comes and tells you, or you meet the aliens, and the aliens, and you tell the alien, or somehow they know that we are a species with amnesia. And they say, oh, well, we know where you guys came from, and it is thus and so, right? The Pleiadians came here, and they took a bunch of apes, and they did some gene modification, and Bob's your uncle, you know, literally, actually, Bob's your uncle 40,000 years ago. And there you go. That's where humans came from. It's like, bullshit, guys. Okay, don't believe them. Because here's my understanding of it. And my understanding is that we're like probably the 5th major human civilization on this planet. And our civilization is a remnant civilization from the 4th, obviously, and that 4th civilization was destroyed during the Ice Age, or the Ice Age breaking out, or, you know, leading into the warming period we're in now. And so we know humans, modern Homo sapiens, skeletons and stuff, we've found those that we know to be over 130,000 years old, and those are in California. And there's many reports that they're sitting on evidence from the Americas, both north and south, that there's modern Homo sapiens sapiens, as well as other hominids, all in the same strata of layer of Earth, and that some of these things go back at least 1 million, if not more years. But we also know that from confirmed reports of people that have been doing some of the reading and who understand how the writing is done, that there's literature, there's Sanskrit literature that references human activities, and then almost in passing, as an aside, we get sure and certain temporal signs as to when those activities took place. And so they would write about people doing things in a factual manner, you know, Bob Jones over there, you know, Hindi name or whatever his name was in the Sanskrit, but Bob Jones over there today invented a new way to take, you know, this red dust out of the ground here and make it into some pretty cool little shiny bowls, right? By smelting iron out of it, right? And that oh, by the way, did you notice that there was that particular arrangement of those constellations last night? And so the two are temporally linked within the text, and we know that those constellations, when we put them into our modern software and spin it back, show up as being over 250,000 years back, 253,000 years back. So this is thinking humans writing shit down 253, or referencing stuff that happened 253,000 years ago. So we don't believe the aliens, right? This is why we're going to be suspicious as hell. We're going to take our critical thinking and put a hefty layer of paranoia over the top of it, put it all around it, and protect our critical thinking with our innate paranoia, with our xenophobia that's built into us by universe. So you got it, let's use it, right? Don't believe the aliens or their stooges who may be showing up in the form of government minions. So humans are ancient, just not our particular civilization. And so that being the case, we can claim an ancient lineage, and we don't have to take any shit off of these aliens, right? Just because they're here in fancier floating cars than we've got at the moment. And that's really the truth of it. They just have a different physics, and I think we're on to that physics right now. And then the form of the magnetism and some of the breakthroughs I've had and shared with other people, I don't think we're very far away at all. Now, it won't be me that will bang out the ships or grow them or however, probably grow them. But nonetheless, we'll get there. So anyway, don't believe the aliens and watch out for spike proteins. Can get your throat. My throat's feeling better than it did this morning when I got up. So it's passing rapidly. Chug a tea, I've got my vitamins. I'm pretty convinced that the spike protein has the same failing against vitamin D as does the coronavirus whole, because it is the spike protein that is the point of attachment to the human body. And so it's actually the little flower part, the three-folded proteins, that is the nasty part relative to the effect on the cell. But apparently vitamin D and chaga, which is loaded with vitamin D anyway, does the job. And so, as I say, I'm not particularly worried about it. The contagious vaccinosis is only contagious if you're weak to it, just the same way that the virus is only contagious to it if you are weak to it. And then here we go. Let's see. I did another video for some other people. I was going to edit it and just put it on there. But what I'm going to do is real quick explain to you about the magnetism, because it's really cool, interesting insight. It's 22 trillion times of a second. We have reality pop into existence. Here's another 22 trillion times a second. In between there's no time. So it's just null. When reality pops back into existence, there's an attractive force. Time is moving this way. There's an attractive force. This attractive force is one side of magnetism. And so we'll use the attractive force. We'll use a capital letter A to represent the attractive force as a whole. And then when reality disappears for that 22 trillionth time of a second, there is a repulsive force. And we'll use a capital R to reference that. This is probably, yeah, it's going to look disproportionate. The other one was drawn better, okay? But what I wanted to show was that all of magnetism is based on the golden mean. Or golden ratio. It has built within it the golden mean and the golden angle, okay? And this is why the golden ratio arises into nature, is because every single, what we think of as an atom, is in the act of recreating itself 22 trillion times a second within the golden ratio. So that here we have A plus B, the total length. Here, let me get in another color. Here we have A, and here we have B. Oops. Let's keep it consistent. So B is to A as A is to A plus B, golden ratio. Here we have A plus B for this distance. And here is our A, and here is our B. This is disproportionate. It should be much smaller. So that A, or B is to A as A is to A plus B for the whole distance, right? Also, let me get another color, just because we're referencing another dimension. Here we have A plus B. Here we have our A, and here we have our, here we have our A, and here we have our B. So that B is to A is to A plus B. Now, also, we can draw this another way, but it's difficult to do so. All of these things are literally dimensional, geometric dimensional within magnetism when it recreates itself every 22 trillion times a second. This geometric stuff includes the golden angle right here, right there, and this juxtaposition where the force turns from attractive centripetal draw in over to repulsive centrifugal push out magnetism, both of which exist simultaneously in our perceived reality. But as that perceived reality is being created, when the pulse turns the point, that's where light originates. That's where gravity comes from. So, and that's the dielectric plane. That's actually the dielectric point, okay? It is from a dielectric point that light emerges and gravity emerges, which is in a different sense, okay? Gravity is not really a separate force. It's really just the attractive force. But in any event, so here we have the golden ratio, we have the golden mean involved in this as well, and we have the golden angle involved in it, in that angle right there. When you measure I measured this, so I actually have manifestly measured this part right here. I measured the repulsive force of magnetism and determined it to be to the total and this is physical distance kind of stuff, physical distance kind of stuff. So we measure this into copper and so on. And so I have determined that when magnetism recreates itself as reality recreates itself 22 trillion times a second, the ratio of B to A does exist and is measurable. And the repulsive force is stronger than the attractive force. And you can measure it both mechanistically in terms of micromillimeters, or you can measure it with and I've done that, and I've also measured the strength force with Tesla meters, right? Tesla meters with tuned probes on the end, so that you can get in there and measure the actual difference in the force. And we've altered this to include on the end of that probe a very microfine wire, conductive silver wire, so that we could actually measure the difference in force levels at in Tesla units and Gauss. It didn't really work well in Gauss. Between the attractive and the repulsive force, and have indeed determined that B is to A is A is to A plus B, right? We are living in the golden ratio. We are composed of it. Our body is composed of it. This also, by the way, accounts for chirality. The mostly universe is left-handed. All right, all the molecules want to turn and adhere to the left. This accounts for that. This accounts for why water can't go in a straight line in nature. Again, an aspect of the handedness part of it, and how the molecules have to always keep trying to relocate themselves relative to this notch, if you will, created by this the golden angle. And so I've done a more complete description of this for a bunch of physicists on a little bit of a video, but there you go. This is the derivation of magnetism. And so this is actually the magnetism in universe. In the materium. That is the dielectric point. Get enough of those together and you have a dielectric plane. This understanding should allow us to better design magnets. This understanding allowed me to do folded magnetic fields, for which I've now got 3 patents. This understanding may allow us in the near future to take electricity out of that point without any moving parts, so a solid state genset. Basically, our free energy, if you will, is not free because it's going to cost us a hell of a lot of mental thinking, critical thinking, aware thinking, to get to the point where we can actually derive a machine and build it that will get at that dielectric point and extract direct current, right? What we think of as direct current. It's just, there's only one form of electricity, and that's direct electricity. We call it direct current, and then we put a 60 cycle per second wobble into it and call it alternating current. But it's all still direct current, which is direct electricity. And so there's basically that's the secret of reality in a grapheme. If I were like Ken Wheeler and had the patience, it's not the pain, but if I were like Ken Wheeler and had the patience, I'd have him tattoo that on my head. So there you go, Ken. Watch out you don't get too bald, dude. There's more acreage up there. Anyway, so there we go on that. Now, the rest of the stuff here, the space aliens, the disinfo coming out from everybody, the deception around the vax and, and all of the crap with the BLM and the CCP and the Antifas and all of that, we can just sort of like forget about that for a while because it's all going to percolate up through May, right up to the boundary of June or whenever, June 4th or 6th or something, we'll get the report out or it'll leak out around there, and then we start changing in a more accelerated way with these previous pivots because we're already launched into space over the vax pivot, over the COVID pivot and all of that. We're moving. Now somebody's going to grab us and shift us more with these UFO things. Now, one last thing here, okay? So people don't understand why I invent language as I do. And so I might as well tell you. I figured, well, it's obvious. I shouldn't have to say it, but apparently I do. And that is that it is necessary, or language changes constantly. Your kids will never speak the same language as you. They invent slang from about 7 or 8. They get into just nonsense words before that. But around 7 or 8, they start inventing slang because they're trying to put their emotions to words. So they don't have the same emotional impact or same emotional attachment to a word that you do. And thus the impact for them from a particular word like awesome or shebang or something, who knows, doesn't hit them. And so they come up with new words to express that same feeling. And then you, the adult, having gone through this with your parents and their words, whatever the hell they might have been, you understand this. And so you catch on that your little daughter is saying, oh, this is really cool, only she's not using that word, right? And so language changes constantly with each and every generation. This is part of the preface and premise of my work. This changing constantly aspect of it leads me to just harmonize with that as an Aikidoist in order to accomplish my goals. And so it is easier for you to understand that what I'm doing when I say vax that way, invent a word, as opposed to using vaccine or any of these kind of things, right? And it's because we now have an interesting situation. If you're a computer software programmer, as I have been in the past, you understand that our world is now interpretation of language, not only interpretation of language from humans, by humans, but not only by humans, but also by software. Not AI, even if you call it AI, it's all software, it's all code. And so it's all limited, all right? There's the premise, right? This is why I do this. They will never, ever, ever censor that word because X is an internal symbol in all the algos for porn. And porn makes all these places money. And so it confuses the algo when the algo does not know vax sounds like vax, And so the algo can't sound it. It's not perceptive the way humans are. All it's going to do is react to its basis level of programming. Oh, this must be a porn site. I'll leave that alone because they make money off of porn, right? So that's so you use the propensity that's engineered into our software by regular humans. That is to say, you can always trust natural human reactions. And so software programmers are told, no, you can't censor porn sites. We make our money on that. And so they have to screen out all kinds of stuff from being censored because they want it to come through. And so I just harmonized with that and put 3 X's for vax. I know everybody else puts 2. Okay, but the reason that they put 2 is because in the old days, 2 used to indicate poison. 3 also did indicate poison even prior to that. And that derives from the three balls that were in the three spheres that were in the pharmacists' logos, who were also barbers, anyway, or tooth pullers. And so they got a bad rep, right? Because they poisoned too many people. So anyway, so the vax is poisoning people, and it's still, my stuff is still getting through. A lot of people will have criticized me or have said that I'm working for the CIA or some dumb bullshit like that, because I have not been thrown off of YouTube and other platforms. But they don't understand that I made my living as a linguist and a software engineer, so I know how this shit works. And so I have actively done a huge amount of work to prevent that from happening. And then we had BitChute get mature enough that I could actually use it where I'm located, and I shifted over to a non-censoring platform that you're watching now, because these kind of things can't be put on YouTube. Not only the vax stuff, but you can't even put this kind of stuff on YouTube. I mean, I got more shit for getting close to magnet understanding than you would understand. It's just dangerous to go against the official paradigm in a lot of different ways. Now, I've got another thing here. I'm going to switch this real quick. There we go. Okay, so we're in a new scene here. This is a difficult one for you to make sense of. You're looking at a small device. I'm going to hold it up in the small picture up here. And you see that it's this little glass jar with there's a magnet in this base. And there's this ferrofluid in a couple of different oils. There's a ferrofluid up there. And here we go. Come here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of that ferrofluid, and I've captured it here. Well, you can sort of see me moving it around. Now I'm going to take this down and move it under the other camera. And you'll see me moving the ferrofluid stuff around. The point to examine is, I know that the image is poor, and I'll try and get it to be stable, at least. So hang on, hope I'm not making you sick. Okay, so that's a magnet that's intruding in there. If you see those little black dots of the ferrofluid, which are not really focused, it's because they keep changing in shape. Those dots do not represent the magnetism. They represent the magnetism coming out of this, but they are not the magnetism coming out of this, right? Because those are just the iron particles within the oil that are responding to the invisible lines of force within the magnetism itself. And you can see it whipping up down here in the bottom there, and in its larger mass. So the point being that this is what magnetism looks like, right? You see the larger mass there with the little spikes coming on up. That's the result of what magnetism does spinning out of the magnet, and it doesn't loop back the way we think. Magnetism is just basically like continuous silent explosions that are happening from both ends of the magnet in different directions, because it's spinning back into both of them are spinning in and out of the dielectric plane here, the dielectric point that actually creates the magnet. So this is a continuous, dynamic, active process that we've only just barely scratched the surface of using. And that is, we use it in a static way to turn ones and zeros to the opposite, fundamentally, or to turn on switches or pop a solenoid or this kind of thing, right? But there's so much more we can do, let me get back out of here, to activate magnetism in the materium. Now, unfortunately, we got to get through this shit time in order to get into SciFi world, where we will have this level of activated magnetism out in the materium. But we're not far away. I got to get another cup of tea, and I got to get some exercise and get moving here. We're getting some big results. I mean, my insights on how all this stuff is working are playing out when translated into other people's devices and things. So we'll proceed apace and see if we can't produce something. Now, everybody else, calm down. Watch out for the energies from space. If you're male, you'd better sun your balls, because sperm counts are down. All of this kind of thing just from the environment, right? So get the energy and get it in there. We need the fertility. and live long and prosper. That's my intent. Oh, sorry about that.